All right, so picking up on part four, which is I love you with the love of Christ, and I'll call it God's mic drops, right? And I didn't get to tell you the last time in part three, I talked about the gift, which was the sacred sacramental prayer. And in my opinion, what true prayer is love. You know, it's agape love when you pray for one another. But part four, I love you with the love of Christ and God's mic drop. So I left off saying how, you know, when the guy left, I was like so thankful. You know, I was just like, thank you. Because, you know, wow, it was such a gift. And, you know, I told him, because he intentionally walked all the way over there, not to be nosy, but just to say bye and, you know, say whatever nicety he had to say. I don't remember everything. But, you know, to that I responded with, because it was pure, you know, I love you with the love of Christ. And, you know, he says, I love you. And he, bam, dropped the bike and went off. And to me, that's kind of gangster, because the I love you with the love of Christ, that's my saying, you know, for marginalized people, because a lot of times people say take care, you know, whatever, be safe, and they don't mean it. They don't care whether you take care or not. But God's book in James, I think is chapter 2, it says, and I just came across this like last month or so, it says technically, like literally it says, don't tell someone be warm and be well, and you ain't did nothing to help them do that. You know, what good is it to say that? You know, exactly. So that's my point, and it's really there in the Bible. But the reason I say is God's mic drop, because, you know, I say that because as a marginalized person, you don't want people to think that it's something different than that, right? And then also, as a person that may be giving that love to a marginalized person, you don't want there to be any mistake in either, because people go through things, right? And so, like I said, I trained that particular pastor. So this is flashback, and the reason this flashback, because this same thing happened, like the 23rd of the 23rd of August. So now this happened again the very next Saturday, but it's with an outside individual. So we're going to rewind back to the 23rd of August, so you can see how I know it's God's mic drop, because when God does things, he'll repeat it and say it to you a couple times so you'll catch the message, right? So at this church thing, and nobody would ever know that the pastor told me to be there, because not only did I not satisfy the function that was requested, because he didn't let me know, nobody would ever know that he it's a whole thing, y'all, but God is working with that, so I'll let God work on that. But anyhow, as I was leaving that day, one of the brothers is a music person, and we haven't really done any work, but I think they have everybody has a good heart. There's a song that just came in my mind, but I can't get it out. But everybody has a good heart. But anyhow, but sometimes it translates differently depending on, you know, what they've been exposed to, you know, what their life situation is. But anyhow, so I really needed a hug. Now, this particular brother hasn't given me a hug in quite a while for different reasons. I think the initial reason, the first time they gave me a hug, it was really awkward because it was a situation where you're not prepared for it. So I made a mistake and I bumped, just, you know, mistakenly. There were things that happened by mistake, and I was just like, no, you know. But luckily, I think somebody caught it, and either they saw it or they sensed it. So in order to not make it a big old scene and embarrassing, they kind of intervened and kind of blocked, so there couldn't be no weird apologies and stupid stuff. So that was weird. But I was just like, you know, when hugs are genuine, they're really good hugs, you know. So when I had an opportunity to give a genuine hug the next time, but this wasn't on church grounds, I happened to be at a public somewhere, and they recognized me, and they was like, oh, hey, such and such. And at that point, I was so happy, because I was going to make up for that horrible, that horrible, awkward hug. So, and for me, you know, if I don't know the person that well, but I want them to know that I appreciate them, it's not a body contact hug, it's a shoulder squeeze hug. And so that's what it was. And I was like, and I was but I think that scared them, and they was like, what? I need to go find my girl. You know, I'm just like, so it was funny. It was funny, but, you know, it was funny in a few different ways. It was funny in that it's just weird. You know, I was trying to make up for a bad hug, and it just, you know, somehow translation, because I don't know what language was going on with, when I say language, whatever they had going on in the background. Again, it was mistranslated. And I was like, okay, I know for certain I'm not hugging this individual ever and ever, ever, never, never again. And then there were hug opportunities missed, because hugs are love too. Good hugs are love. Because I was mad at that particular pastor. And I feel like if there's a spiritual disconnect, if something's wrong with you spiritually, I don't want you touching me. I don't want you near me. I don't even want to speak words to you. You know, certain people you will have to speak words to, but I didn't mind speaking words to him, but I don't want him touching me, and I don't want to touch him, period. So, you know, so of course, from somebody on the outside looking in, they don't know what's going on. You know, does this woman have an aversion to touch? Like, what's happening here, you know? So they're just like, we're just going to leave that alone altogether, you know, because they don't know what the situation is, you know. But I think there started to become an understanding, either because maybe some people were disclosing truth, which I don't think there's a lot going on these days. I'm kind of ostracized. We'll get to all of that. But some people were disclosing truth, so there was some part of understanding that was coming, because as I was leaving, I asked this particular individual, you know, I told him about something that I wrote, which I haven't touched since probably June. And I wanted them to, you know, bring it into the real world, bring it from my mind into the real world. I wanted to hear what it sounded like, right? And so they said they would, and God bless them, because I needed a hug that day, because I had so much hate thrown for me in so many different ways, and I was really sick, and I wasn't even planning on showing up, but I showed up because I thought I had a duty that was going to help me with my organization that I was called to do by the pastor, but the pastor didn't even acknowledge that I was there. And when it was time for that duty to be served, he intentionally excluded me by not letting me know that it was going on. I didn't even know what was going on, you know. But so that hug meant a lot to me, even though that hug wasn't a good, super delicious hug. Like, I like good hugs that come from, you know, the heart, the spirit. You can feel it. You know, when you hug somebody with a good heart, you can feel it. You can feel the transaction. It's a transaction that happens, an emotion transaction, a spiritual transaction. I don't know what, an energy exchange is what happens. That's what it is, an energy exchange. So, you know, I appreciate the hug, but I was so sad and so tired. It was just so awkward, and I know that I looked a mess with it all, which I always do, but I really needed it. You know, I needed it. I needed it. I was so happy for it. And then the pastor says, and I don't know if he said it because, I don't know, you know, part of it I think is genuine, but I think part of it, because like I said, I don't know about males, even though as a pastor is still a male, is just, you know, because that's his church, you're not going to have the last word in providing what somebody in my congregation spiritually or emotionally needs. And so he said, I love you. And I accepted it, because, and normally I would be so quick to be, you mean I love you with the love of Christ, don't forget. But I just assumed that that's what it is, because, you know, what other way is there? You know what I'm saying? What other way? And then even if it wasn't, you know, the truth was being told, that maybe, you know, I can't love you like Christ, but I love you like the world does, and the world will tell you they love you and they don't. But it's okay, because I got so much hate when I showed up at that church that day. And I was really sick. So, you know, it meant a lot to me. And when I say God did the mic drop, because you know how back in the day when men started wearing pink, and they were like, real men wear pink, and when this guy this past Saturday just said, I said, I love you with the love of Christ, and he just said, I love you, and dropped the mic and kept it moving. He ain't got to add the love of Christ, because you know what it is. You know, and to me, that's God's mic drop. God's like, don't play with me. I know, you know, God's like, don't play with me. I know exactly what it is. You know what I'm saying? And you know what it is too. And all God's people know what it is. We ain't got to add with the love of Christ or with it, whatever on there. You know what I'm saying? Now, if you're dealing with people that ain't godly, you know, you got to make it a point to make sure. But God's like, you know, I got this. I did this. And I believe it's true, you know. And that was the mic drop. And I was like, okay, you know, God's letting me know that I'm loved, period. You know, and I appreciate that. And even with the pastor, there's just, you know, there's discrepancies and things like that. There's things, but God is doing what God does. You know what I'm saying? And I believe that, you know, sometimes God's voice speaks through people, because when you hear the same thing, just like when evil happens, when you see evil things happen, and this is how I knew that the evil things were real, because it would be the same, exact same words, exact same spent energy, but from different people from completely different places. So that's how you knew it was that spirit. And speaking of spirits, and this is a segue, and I'll come back to it, I got to do it in the next video.